All right, hello. So today I'm going to be talking about why it's so difficult to find your authentic self and why I think it is, in fact, the hardest thing anyone will ever do. And next week, I'm going to be talking about why the self love path is the most direct path to enlightenment, um, is the most direct path to a sustained enlightenment experience. And so today, this video is going to be kind of the preamble for that one. So if you enjoy this, come back to the next week, and we'll talk about the why the self love path, like I say, is the most direct path. Not the easiest, not a path that is fast, not a path that is going to make the journey anything other than what it actually is, which is just incredibly challenging. But it is the most direct path. And it is the path that will help you avoid the most pitfalls. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. This week, again, I'm talking about why it is so difficult to find your true self. And we're going to be talking about shame and guilt and how that plays into this. And we're going to be talking about why we run programs and we don't know that we're running them. That we are living from a place of inauthenticity and disconnection from reality. And that we literally have no idea that we're doing it because it feels like us. It feels like we are making choices. It feels like we are doing what we want to be doing. It feels like we're doing the right thing. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So again, if you've been watching any of my videos, if you've been paying attention to any of my content for the last at least the last year, and if not before that, you know that we all have childhood trauma, right? And I harp on this. I go over and over and over why our childhoods are so important for us to go back to and look at and understand if we want to wake up, right? Like, this is not just if you want to have a nice life or find your purpose or step into abundance. Like, I know that like the self-love path has kind of been co-opted by capitalism, to be honest, but the real path, the real purpose of the self-love path, again, like we're going to talk about much deeper next week, is awakening. It's enlightenment. It's the purpose of the path is to set you free from the created matrix that exists. And that is what this path will do for you if you do it seriously. If you take it seriously, it will be the thing that liberates you from the hell, essentially, of the consensus reality that we live in. And so, again, I know that this can sound like, oh, self-love, and oh, what do we, like, what, it's so frivolous, whatever, loving yourself isn't really, what's that going to do for me, right? And I know that a lot of people can say, like, right, if I love myself, am I going to find my career? Am I going to get rich? Am I going to find the love of my life? Am I going to finally step into this life where I have complete freedom? And again, that's not really what this is about, right? And a lot of that is the consensus reality that we're swimming in, is our goals even, right? Like the things that we're doing, what we're doing for, we don't even recognize that it's hollow and that it's empty and that it's not taking us anywhere, right? So the bottom line is that, again, hi Sierra, Kiara, the bottom line is that the reason we all are disconnected from reality, the reason we are not already all living in an enlightened society, is because of trauma. It's because of human race trauma from the very, very beginning of humans developing consciousness. From the very beginning of that. That affects you now. All the way to the consensus reality that you were born into and the programming that you were given, specifically as an individual, is the reason we're not living as an enlightened society. And I think that the other thing that I really just want to say here is we need to understand that we didn't just, as a humanity, pop into self-awareness and decide to fuck ourselves over. Okay, this is like the view that we have of ourselves, and it's very, I understand why we would want to hold this view, right? I understand that a lot of us, like especially when we're doing inner child work and when we're looking at our childhood traumas and we're doing all this work, we're looking to go back. Like we're thinking that, okay, if I do my inner child work enough, I'll return to this person that I was when I was a child, who was perfect and innocent and knew everything. And in so doing, I'll find all these awesome things. And I know that there are other people out there, especially in the spirituality world and especially in the health world, that again have this idea that we're going to return to some previous point in human history where we were more aware, more awake, more enlightened, and where we've like lost the plot since then. And we're going to go back to how it was, right? We're going to go back to nature. We're going to go back to eating a natural diet and living outside and all of these things. Because it's the fact that we have gone forward and we've made all these mistakes, like that meme, I think that's on the internet, is like the ape and it looks like the evolution, and then it's like the modern man and it's like turn around, go back, we fucked up. And I get it, right? Of course we want to believe that we've already figured it out. We've already been there at some point, and we just have to go back to it. We just have to get back to that thing we already knew. We want to believe that we remember somewhere that, and even, like I say, I understand the believing that we're Pleiadians or souls or from somewhere else. Because again, we want to believe that we're connected to something that's already done this. We're past this already at some point. This is, we're redoing something. We just have to remember something. We just have to get back to what we had before. And what I'm just going to say is that in this reality that we live in, that we're operating within, where time is a thing, because time serves a very important function in our current reality for awakening. And like I say, we're going to talk about that more next week, that like the progression of time is incredibly helpful if we can understand how this reality is set up and why it's set up this way. Not necessarily why, like I don't know why, but it just, this is how it's set up. And if we can understand that we're not going back somewhere, we're not ever going to return to a thing, because everything that's happened to you has happened to you. Everything that you've experienced, you've experienced. You can't undo anything that you've been through. You're not gonna unexperience any of the things you've experienced. So this path isn't about taking you back somewhere. This path isn't a return to anything. This is an integration, because again, it's too late. We can't undo anything that we've been through. We can't undo, we can't go back. We cannot go back to our childhoods and be unconditioned. We can't go back to our childhoods and be untraumatized. We can't go back to any point before now in human history and undo the misunderstandings and the false perceptions and the false paths, essentially, that we've all been down. The answer, what we actually want, is to integrate the information that we have gotten through these experiences. That's what this is. Pain in this life, suffering in this life, comes from not integrating. So suffering comes from not integrating our painful experiences. And what integrating means is that we accept it for how it is, not forgive it, not love it, not say it was right, and that's how things should be forever. That's not what acceptance means. We accept that what happened is what happened. That there is no other reality. So integration, again, is the first thing is we accept that what happened happened. Meaning, that was the series of events. That there was cause, effect. And that was the effect. We're not going to argue with reality. Okay? And then we embrace how we feel about that. We don't like it. We don't want it. We wish it was another way. It was painful. It was hard. It hurt. We take time to allow ourselves to feel everything we feel about what happened. Okay, so acceptance does not mean approval. Acceptance does not mean it was how I want it to be. Acceptance does not mean this is how I want it to be forever. Acceptance, again, simply means, all acceptance means, is that I'm not going to argue with reality on that being what happened. What happened is what happened. There was a cause, maybe I don't understand. There were several causes, maybe I don't understand. But that was the effect. And I'm not going to argue with reality on that one. Reality is what it is. It happened. So now, how do I feel about it? How can I love myself safe within that? Right? Accepting ourselves, processing, crying, journaling, talking about it. All of the emotional process we have to go through. We go through it. And as we allow for that, as we make ourselves safe, we don't blame ourselves, we don't shame ourselves, we don't guilt ourselves, we don't make what happened wrong in the sense of it shouldn't have gone that way, in the sense of reality fucked up. That there was effect, and there should have been a different, there was cause, and there should have been a different effect. There wasn't a different effect. So then we can understand, we can start to actually understand why the effect was what it was. When we don't accept the effect, we will never understand the cause. And when we don't understand the cause, we can't change things. When we don't understand what is causing the phenomenon that's happening, we can't make meaningful changes to our behavior. We can't make meaningful changes to society's behavior. We can't make meaningful changes. Because, again, if you don't know why the faucet is leaking, if you don't know where the leak is, if you don't know how to fix it, you see what I'm saying? If you don't know where the leak is, if you don't know what the cause of the leak is, you can't solve the problem. So you first have to accept there's a leak in the tap. It's leaking. That might not be what I want it to be doing. That may not be what I want it to be doing forever. In fact, I really want it to stop leaking. But I accept that it's leaking. Right? It's leaking. It does me no favors to tell myself it's not leaking. I don't want it to be leaking, so it's not leaking. Or it shouldn't be leaking. Well, it should. There's absolutely a reason why it's leaking. So now that I'm not arguing with reality, it's leaking. That's what's happening. I can investigate into why it's happening. Because when we start with, I don't want this to be how it is, we've already shot ourselves in the foot. So this is my lesson on integration. So again, we accept that it's leaking. Then we can investigate. Why is it leaking? What's going on? How do I fix it? Then we can fix it. Then we can make a meaningful change. Because again, if we don't accept that it's leaking, or we don't come to a place of, okay, now I'm going to observe this, right? We assume we already know. Okay, well, I'm going to stop up this part. It doesn't stop leaking. Well, I did what I was supposed to do, right? That we all do that. We put gauze somewhere over not the hole. And then we're like, oh, it's still leaking. But I did what I thought I was supposed to do. Again, reality fucked up. No, it didn't. What you thought was the solution wasn't the solution. That doesn't mean there isn't a solution. That doesn't mean there isn't something we can do. It just means the thing you thought it was, wasn't. So let it go. Don't argue with reality. If what you are doing doesn't actually solve the problem, it's not correct. And that's okay. We have to let it go and continue to investigate. And we investigate and we investigate. And we're going to do a million different things that we think are the right answer. And if it doesn't give us the result we're looking for, it's not the right answer. Don't argue with reality. So then keep investigating, keep looking, keep going, keep trying things, keep learning, keep observing. This is how we learn. This is how we integrate. So again, we go back to our childhoods. We go back to what happened to us. We go back to all of these painful things. Not just so that we can forgive. Not so that we can be okay with what happened to us. That's part of it. Of course, we all want to have peace. We all want to make peace with what happened to us. And again, if we can get to a place where we understand we're not going to change what happened to us, we cannot go back and change it. Everything that happened, happened. Everything you've experienced, you've already experienced. It's a part of you now. Okay? It's a part of you now. We have to think of it like you can't uneat something. Once you've swallowed it, it's a part of you now. It has to go through the system somehow. So if we can accept that, we can start to say, okay, from here, how do I process what happened to me? Because this processing of our childhood traumas, this processing of our current suffering, so the things that we are struggling with over and over and over again in our lives right here, right now, today, these are the roots of our programming and our conditioning that's false. These are our roots of our programming and conditioning of our just simple misunderstandings of how reality works. And we inherited those. So again, if you want to go back and watch last week's video, talking about how nothing that you are struggling with, nothing that you believe, nothing that you think, nothing of your conditioning, your programming, your way of being started with you. That's lineage. That's all humanity has been trying to figure it out for the entirety of humanity. Humanity has been trying to figure it out for the entirety of humanity. And I know that there's arguments for times and places where it seemed like we had more enlightened societies. And that could be true. It absolutely could be true. However, we need to accept where we are. The reality we're living in. The time we're living in. The information we're dealing with. The consensus reality that we have. Okay? Now, that is the preamble, okay? Integration of what happened to you is how you will understand how to create a life that you want to live that feels good for you. You can't go back and undo it. You can't go back and come into a different time. Your life is your life. You're here right now in this time. All the information of everything that you've been through can be information that wakes you up. All of it. Every single thing that you have been through. Every lineage thing that you have can be information that wakes you up. Or it can be information that traps you and keeps you stuck. And it completely depends upon how you choose to use it. Are you going to integrate it? Are you going to accept that this is what happened? This is what I went through. And now what do I do with it? What do I learn from it? How can I use it to evolve my understanding of reality? Because again, what is freedom? What is liberation? It's a deeper and deeper and deeper understanding of how reality works. You becoming yourself is the same path. It's the exact same path of you understanding how reality works, awakening to enlightenment. It's the exact same path. Because the way that you have access to reality is through yourself, through your perspective. There is no getting rid of you to understand reality. There's only integrating everything you have been through, integrating yourself, understanding yourself. And through that process, like I say, we're going to talk about this very deeply next week, you will understand reality. They are one and the same path. Now, again, you have been programmed. And the other very, very, very important thing to understand is that ultimately, you, like every other living thing, want to live. That's your goal. You want to express your genetic potential. That is the one thing that feels good to all living things, is to be on our authentic path of growth. When we say we want this or that, when we think this is going to make me happy, everything that we are motivated to do and to go after is rooted in a belief somewhere that that thing is going to make it easier for me to express my genetic potential, to discover myself, and to be myself. That is why you do what you do. That is why you do everything you do. That is the one driving, motivating factor that motivates all of everyone and everything that is alive. No one is operating outside of that single desire. It's selfish, technically. We are all that. And this selfish desire to express as your individual self is also, from an enlightened perspective, the most benevolent thing you will ever do. Okay? From a vantage point of misunderstanding, it will be the most chaotic and destructive thing you ever do. Trying to live for yourself from a separation vantage point, you will be a Cancer. Unintentionally, because you won't know, but you will destroy yourself through destroying your host. That's what most of us are doing. From an enlightened perspective, connection to all things, your selfish desire to express yourself will operate within your understanding of your interconnectedness to all things. And so your selfishness will include everyone and everything. That's the difference. So anyways, you want to express as yourself. That is the one thing that feels good authentically to us. To be in the conditions where it's safe for us to express ourselves. Now, exactly, you know where I'm going with this. In our childhoods, it did not matter what real reality was. It did not matter what real reality was. In our childhoods, survival had nothing to do with aligning with reality. Just take that in for a sec. From the very beginning of your life, when you were just learning how life worked, on a level of your nervous system, because you didn't have cognitive function yet. You could not reason. You could not logic. This was not based in your current adult way of processing and understanding information. When you were a nervous system with immature storytelling capacity all throughout your young childhood, where you didn't understand reality, you didn't understand how things worked, you had a very basic understanding, and the stories you created and the things that you invented for why things were happening were almost always wrong from a child perspective. That's where you were learning how reality worked for the first 7 to 15 years of your life. And for those first 7 to 15 years of your life, reality didn't work the way it works. Like literally, that is your parents were overriding real reality. You were in a false reality. Your programming, every single one of us, were programmed in a false reality. And that's the only way we as humans can survive. Because as children, we are not capable of providing for ourselves. We are not capable of understanding how reality works. We are not capable of interpreting cause and effect. We are not capable of any of the things that are required to live an enlightened life as a child. So no, you don't want to go back to your childhood. Trust me, no matter how peaceful and lovely and idyllic it wasn't reality. That was a temporary, codependent reality that was completely necessary for your survival. See, do we understand this now? I hope this is a profound enlightenment experience for you right here. That during your childhood, you were being programmed in your nervous system and in a mind that didn't have the capacity to storytell or understand within a reality that wasn't real reality. Your survival as a child had nothing to do with aligning with reality, and everything to do with aligning with that which appeased and pleased your caregivers. Aligning with how your caregivers functioned. Because they were your source for everything. And again, if you don't understand how profound that is, right? You being your authentic self, which is ultimately what is good for you, if that contradicted the programming of your caregivers, if they rejected you, abandoned you, told you not to be that way, guilted you, shamed you, what was more important for your survival short term? Expressing your true self anyways? And getting rejected by your caregivers, who then could just stop providing for you? To your childhood nervous system, right? You didn't have the awareness that mommy and daddy can be mad at me and still provide for me. You didn't have the awareness that mommy and daddy can disapprove of me and I'm still going to get food and I'm still going to be okay. You didn't have that. You had fight or flight. You had the second mommy and daddy are pulling away, that's my source. That's God. And I'm separate. And my separateness is a frickin' threat to me. This is where we develop the idea that our egos are bad, or that any part of us is bad. This is the birth of the separate self that is bad, that I now have shame around, that I now have guilt, that I now want to get rid of, that I'm now constantly going to be going to spiritual teachers to help me improve out of myself or spiritualize out of myself. Or no, this is just self-growth, this is just a bad part of me. This is the birth of that. This is the genesis of that. All the parts of you that didn't align with your caregiver's consensus reality, which, where did they get it? Remember, they got their consensus reality from their parents, and from their society, and from their parents, and their society, and their parents, and their society. It's all this telephone of this is how the world works, and this is how you have to be, and this is what's good, and this is what's bad. And it's all this amalgamation of culture and experiences that your parents had and experiences that their parents had and other cultures, and all. It's a mishmash of what we think we have to do to survive. Because again, just like that initial period of childhood where aligning with consensus reality took precedence over aligning with your truth, even though, again, overall aligning with your truth would have been what is vital for you in real reality. We don't live in real reality. None of us do. Especially so in our childhoods, we didn't live in real reality. We lived in our parents' reality. We lived in our household reality. Those were the rules that mattered. So if mom and dad thought this way of eating was the right way, and it made you sick, and then they blamed you, what were you going to do? You couldn't understand. You couldn't eat different. You're just sick now. That's it. You have pain, you're abandoned. They can't fix it for you. You don't know what's going on. They think there's something wrong with you. That's where that story comes from. You're weak, you're weird, we're all fine, what's wrong with you? Right? You want to express as a dramatic thespian, and your caregivers are introverts who want you to be an intellectual. Now you're going to spend the whole rest of your life thinking there's something wrong with you that you're dramatic, thinking there's something wrong with you that you're theatrical, continually trying to become an introvert when you are not. And it's not going to be apparent to you as an adult, oh yeah, I can be an extrovert, that's okay. No, because now, as a child, the one thing you have control over is your behavior. You don't have control over the resources. You don't have control over providing for yourself. You don't have control over love. You don't have control over your own learning path. You have a nervous system that says, if I get rejected, I'm going to die. So now this thespian part of me is bad. So it doesn't get to grow and mature into the mature extrovert. Now this part of you gets shadowed. You repress it, you deny it. And it starts to come out in temper tantrums. It starts to come out in screaming and yelling and losing your emotional cool. It starts to express as rebellion, acting out in ways that harm you. And you start to think, well, see, this part of me is clearly bad. Look at all these bad things it does. You don't know, this is just the thespian part of me. This is just the extrovert part of me that is being squashed by me trying to be an introvert. And every day you're an introvert, you think, good job, I did it. I'm an introvert. I did a really good job being an introvert today. I forced myself to be quiet all day. And then in order to survive, in order to cope with the pain of that, right? So the nervous system is going to feel good that, okay, that felt safe. I'm going to get my needs met. I'm going to be provided for in this temporary reality of my childhood. But because it's not who you really are, it's going to hurt. Somewhere inside, you will have that anxiety, that depression, that aching, that, oh, something is not right. And you won't know what it is. And you'll think it's something wrong with you because you've been told your whole life it's something wrong with you. And then you're going to act out. Because like I say, this thespian part now is shadowed, but it doesn't mean it goes anywhere. It just didn't get to grow. Now, it's scared. It's under attack. It's wounded. So it comes out as wounding. So you have emotional outbursts, and then you cope with drinking, and you think you're doing really good on all the days that you're an introvert, and that feels good for you on some level. Okay, so this is where the understanding why we feel good when we do what we do, understanding true pain and true pleasure versus consensus reality pain and consensus reality pleasure is so difficult. Because to your nervous system, being introverted is going to feel good. It's going to feel safe. You did the thing you needed to do to get provided for in your childhood. But then There's pain later, and you don't know where that pain came from. Why are you so addicted to alcohol? Why do you have these emotional outbursts? What's wrong with me? Nothing. Anytime you start to act out, you're going to hate yourself. You're going to shame yourself. You're going to guilt yourself. And you're going to do it in a way that isn't healthy. Like I said, it's going to be emotional outbursts. It's going to be drinking and getting so drunk and then getting up on stage and singing and making a fool of yourself or whatever. And thinking like, man, see, this part of me is bad. Because all I see of it is pain and destructive patterns. And it's like, yes, because that's who you really are. Right? So all of us who are like, I'm going to get rid of this thing. I'm going to get rid of my emotional outbursts. I'm going to get rid of my neediness. I'm going to get rid of my addiction. I'm going to get rid of my need to cope. I'm going to get rid of my neurosis. And then I will be my higher self. No, you won't. Absolutely not. That addiction, that neurosis, that behavior is your higher self. It's your higher self that never got to grow because it feels completely existential threat to express that, to own that part of you. The shame and the guilt you have around every part of you is there to keep you in line with the consensus reality of your childhood and then the consensus reality of adulthood. Because, again, when you were being programmed, your nervous system knew that acceptance equaled provision. I am not independent. I cannot provide for myself. I need someone outside of me to be approving of me in order for me to get my needs met. So I have to destroy, squash, get rid of any part of myself that compromises that. Otherwise, I'm going to die. You see? So that's still how you feel. And then, like I said, everything about you that was rejected or abandoned or shamed or guilted got shadowed. So now it didn't get to grow into the healthy expression of itself. It's now in the wounded expression of itself. So it's not going to feel good to embrace these parts of yourself. You're going to want to hear the self-help teacher who tells you, I can help you get rid of that. That's not who you really are. That neediness, that's not your higher self. That's not who you are. You're strong and independent. You can get to a place where you never have another need of another human ever again. No, of course not. That's a natural thing, that we're interdependent. But if you were raised in a household where being independent was the thing that was celebrated, and anytime you had a very real, reasonable childhood need, you overexhausted your parents, where do you think you're going to learn that being needy is never okay? And then does that needy part of you go away? Of course not. You just suppress it and deny it, and then it comes out like crazy. And you think this part of me is bad. Look, it destroys all my relationships. And then, because of your conditioning, because of your programming, your perception is set. You understand the rules of your upbringing. You understand the rules of your childhood. You understand the rules of your caregiver's household. So now what do you do as an adult? As you start to go and decide where you want to be and who you want to hang out with and what you want to be involved in as an adult. Something totally different. People who have a completely different idea about what is right and wrong. Groups where you don't know what the rules are to get your needs met of love and approval. Of course not. You're going to go and find all the people that agree with your caregiver's way of being. Because again, we don't live in interaction with real reality by itself. We live in a society where we have complex thought and complex ways of beings and systems that we can override reality temporarily. Again, right? In your childhood household, your parents were overriding reality temporarily. Eventually, the consequences show up in your health, in your way of being, in your mindset, your neuroses, your habits, your codependencies, your ways where you don't understand how things work and you're constantly having the same problem over and over again. That's the truth coming out. Your parents didn't teach you what reality is. Real reality is always going to win. But in the temporary reality of your childhood, you had to do what you needed to do to be accepted by them, to be provided for. And now it's the same thing in society. We have society that are built upon all these false understandings of how the reality works. And we are trying to fit in and survive within these systems because we still believe that acceptance equals provision, even as adults. That's why we're all so afraid our boss is going to hate us. We're also afraid our friends are going to hate us. We're also afraid social media is going to hate us. Because if we get outcasted, that feels like death. And yes, for a very, very long time in human history, to be outcasted from your tribe was death. To be outcasted from society, to try to have to live on your own, was impossible. So that's in your nervous system. And then the very real reality of, as a child, being rejected by your caregivers was death. So now, do you think it's going to feel good to discover these authentic parts of yourself? Because again, the only reason you're not already connected to all these authentic parts of you is because they were traumatized in your childhood. None of us were fully aware of who we were, knew our real authentic selves, and then just decided to stop being that. Okay? There's not one single part of you that you're not connected with right now. That you're not connected with for any reason other than trauma. There would have been no reason to not be your real self if that real self was accepted, because that would have felt good on both levels. Yes, that would have felt good long term. This is who I am, so this is what feels good to me to be. And it would have felt good short term. This also gets me approval. Great. So all the authentic parts of you that were accepted, you're living that. And those are the parts of your life where you don't have cognitive dissonance. The real parts of you that are accepted by your tribe, as in by society, or that were accepted by your parents, that's where you don't have cognitive dissonance. That's where you don't have shadow. That's where you are seeing that you have natural growth. These parts of you that you don't have to force to grow, you just follow what feels good to you and what you're interested in, and it just grows. You don't have to force yourself. That's your authentic self. That's what it's like to live an authentic life. Every other part of you, every other part, every part that's coping, that's addicted, that makes the same stupid decisions over and over and over again, that picks the wrong relationship, that doesn't know what you want, that's confused, that's hurting, that's lonely, that feels shame, that feels guilt, that hurts you or hurts others, are authentic parts of you that are in trauma. Period. End of story. That's it. There is no bad part of you. You are not going to get rid of anything to become your higher self. Never. Any part of you that is acting in pain is acting out of trauma, of having not been accepted. Not being accepted, not being allowed to grow, right? That part of you that's violent is the part of you that didn't get to learn what it actually feels like to hurt someone else. You're trying to memorize, don't do that. But you don't have empathy because you didn't get to learn that. Because your nervous system got shut down when you got rejected for hitting. You didn't get to grow. So yes, that part of you is still violent because it's still 2 years old. It's traumatized. It's trapped. It needs love first. So this is why, again, discovering the true, authentic parts of yourself doesn't feel like, oh my God, I discovered this part of myself and it's so amazing and I'm so excited to be this real me. It might feel like that for a minute, but then the reality is going to crush in on you. Like, oh my God, if I do that, I'm going to die. And you're not going to think that sentence. What you're going to think is, well, if I do that, this person's going to be mad at me, or this is going to happen, and it's going to be kind of like this weird disjointed thing, and there's just like an emotional experience of shutdown and some very short-sighted story as to why you can't ever be that and why that's bad, and then that's the end. And all these reasons why, but every time I've tried to be that in the past, these horrible things happened. I got rejected, and so no. That's what it's going to feel like. For the first 2 years of your self-love journey, when you're discovering authentic parts of yourself, you're just going to feel like you're going to die. That's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like liberation. It doesn't feel like freedom. It doesn't feel like clarity. It feels like, oh my God, no. No. This part of me has to be bad. I have to get rid of it. It's scary. It's out of control. You're going to feel like a child. Like you're going to literally feel like a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old that's just freaking out. That's sad, that's scared, that's alone, that like got rejected, that got abandoned. That's what it feels like. That's why this is not easy. This is the hardest thing you'll ever do. To actually bring love to your authentic self is going to be going against your nervous system programming that tells you that if I am this way, I will die. Yes, more than the first 2 years. But does this make sense? So for everyone out there who's thinking, I must be doing it wrong, or this path isn't working, that I'm connecting with all these parts of myself and it's just pain. It's just confusion. I'm just connecting with these very childish, childlike, afraid, not developed parts of myself. Yes. Those are your higher self parts that got stunted in their growth. You're not going to get rid of your inner child. You're going to mature your inner child through giving it what it never got, which is love. Because that's a program we're never going to override. In order for something to grow, it has to feel safe. It has to feel like it's going to get its needs met. And for us, because of the temporary reality of our childhoods, love is what feels like safety. Self-love is the only fucking way. Because again, we can't rely on the external culture to unconditionally love us. They're not going to. Especially in our immature, crazy, neurotic, harmful places. But that's where we are. Again, stop trying to argue with reality. We all have these self and externally destructive parts of self. And those are the parts of us that got stunted in our growth because they were not loved. They were cut off from love. And the more we continue to cut them off from love, the more we keep them stuck exactly where they are. The more we keep ourselves stuck. So it doesn't matter how many spiritual practices you do. It doesn't matter how much discipline you do. It doesn't matter how much you spiritually whip yourself into a frenzy of I will never do that bad thing ever again. I get it now, ayahuasca, blah, 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 blah. That part of you is still going to be there. You're going to be like positively frenzying yourself. You're going to be doing all your good habits. You're going to be on ayahuasca. You're going to understand everything. And then you're going to go and you're going to drink. Because you have to. Because that's where you're actually at. And until you love that part of yourself, you go back to that part that drinks, that smokes, that hurts others, that lies, that copes, that is addicted, whatever it is, that is needy, that expresses in some way you don't like, and say, okay, I love you. You are a part of me. You are a part of my higher self. You're traumatized, you're hurting, you're immature. The only way that you're going to grow into this person I want to be is from safety. And the only way to make it safe is to give it love. And it's going to feel like you're going to die to do that. Your mind is going to come up with like a billion stories. You are going to think you're the exception. You are going to think your thing is the thing. I can't love this. Everyone will hate me. I will actually die. It's not possible. No, this part is really bad. Look at all the pain. Look at everything that I do. It's not good. If I accept it and if I love it for how it is right now, and I stay this way forever, I'm a horrible person. I have to keep doing my self-improvement. I have to keep doing my pseudo-spirituality. I have to get rid of this. You are going to think that. And so long as you do, you will stay stuck. You will be the guru who realizes all of this. It has every beautiful thing to say, who gets it, and then has the shadow that takes you down. Because it's not a shadow. It's an immaturity. And absolutely, there's nothing wrong with being immature. We're all on a path. You're on a path. So it doesn't feel good to connect with your authentic self right now. Because your authentic self got traumatized by your caregivers and by society. By the values of society. The false matrix that we live in, which we're going to talk a lot more about next video, is continuing to reinforce your false programming. That these parts of you are bad. You can't be this way. This is the right way to be. Productive. Mature. That even this is what maturity looks like. What society has told you maturity looks like could be totally wrong. What society has told you is good could be totally wrong. What society told you is moral and ethical could be totally wrong. What society is telling you is bad and negative and you shouldn't be that, including spirituality, including self-help. What the world is telling you about your addictions and your anxiety and your depression and your non-productivity is fucking wrong. I can tell you that right now. Everything that everyone is telling you, if it's not, this is a part of you that's hurting and needs love, and it's a good part of you, and it has a good message for you, and it wants to help you, it's just confused, it got its wires crossed. If that's not the message, it's wrong. And I will boldly say that forever, for the rest of my life. There's nothing wrong with you. And until we start to get that, none of us are going to mature into our higher selves where we can actually be benevolent. Because we won't understand. We'll never understand. These parts of us will stay immature forever. They will stay caught in the matrix forever. Awakening from the matrix is the hardest thing you will ever do. Loving your real self, finding your real self, even knowing what your real self is, you're not going to know. When you first come into contact with all these parts of yourself, they're going to be traumatized and immature. You're not going to be like, oh, that's my extroverted part. That's okay, just love it. No, that's going to be the part of you that right now drinks and explodes emotionally. You're not going to have any idea that it's your extroverted part. Not until you love the parts that drink and explode emotionally. Accept them. They are reality. You don't have to like it. You don't have to want it, but you have to love it. You love the shit out of these parts. And then you get curious as to why. Oh, well, yeah, I wasn't allowed. And what do I really actually want to do? What do these parts of me really want? What does this part of me really want? Attention! Oh, well, that's bad. You can't want attention. Well, what if it isn't a bad? What if that was conditioning? What if this part of me that wants attention can just get some attention? I'll give it some attention. There might be some other people in my reality who will give me some attention. And when I just ask for it nicely, it's not so chaotic and destructive. Maybe being extroverted isn't bad. Oh my goodness, I'm an extrovert. That's how that's going to go. But right, it's going to start with, I'm an immature mess who drinks and explodes emotionally. You see? That's what it looks like to connect with your real self. And then that whole journey of actually approving of that part of yourself is going to feel like death. Your nervous system is going to be kicking in over and over and over again, being like, no, 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 no. Don't do that. Don't look at that. Can't be that. No, 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 no. It's bad, 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 bad. Shame, wrong, guilt. Because it thinks if you are that way, you will die. Because your caregivers will reject you. So it is going to feel like death over and over and over and over and over again to connect with your real self. It's going to feel like you're immature, you're crazy, you're neurotic, and you're dying. That's what it feels like to connect with your real self. So if anyone out there thinks, I'll just follow my bliss and I'll find my real self. No, because right now your bliss is your conditioning. You're going to follow your bliss all the way into a thing that makes you cope. You're going to follow your bliss all the way into your anxiety and your depression, and you're not going to know why. Because you're following your bliss, but really you're not. You're following your conditioning. What feels good to you right now is your conditioning, most likely. What gets you accepted, what gets you approved of. What feels terrible right now is your real self. So you're not going to follow your bliss. You're going to follow your death. Really. You're going to follow your shame and your guilt. Every part where you have shame and every part where you have guilt, that's your entry point into your real self. Why? What does that part of you need? What does that part of you want? If you were to love and embrace this part of yourself over and over and over and over again, what does it actually want? What does it actually need? What does it want to express? How do you feel like you're going to die if you are that? And how have the people around you reinforced that childhood conditioning? Because you picked the people that mirrored your childhood conditioning. So everyone to you is not everyone. It's not how the real world works. There are people who will really like who you really are. You just don't see them because you don't know how to play by their rules yet. Your everyone isn't everyone. Being rejected by your tribe, you're not going to die. I promise. But you're going to think you are. So that's why this is so hard. Because your nervous system is trying to stop you. It absolutely is. So that's why. Love, love, love. Make yourself feel safe. Over and over and over again. That's the one answer. That's how you'll grow. And now we're going to take this much deeper next week. I'm very, very excited. So please come back next week. But for now, just understand that this is why this is so hard. It doesn't feel good to come into contact with your real self. Not right now. It will, but not right now. Okay? I love you. You're amazing. You're perfect. There's nothing wrong with you. All your worst parts are your higher self, and they will be. I love them. You're safe with me. Now, can you be safe with you? Okay? And you're not the exception. You are not the exception. All right. I love you. I love you. I love you. Mwah. See you next week. We'll talk about how this path is the most direct path to a sustained enlightenment life. Okay? And until then, I'll see you in my stories. And I love you very much.